Hello and welcome to Forever Sports. A trouble for Henco Venter from that clip, which is currently doing the rounds across social media, and it has officially been cited. And it doesn't look good. So I thought we'd just jump on here and talk a little bit about it, because I'll be interested to see what kind of precedent this sort of sets regarding the entire incident. I think that's sort of the main thing. We're going to have actually a look at the incident, and the reason why I think it's quite interesting is because of the sort of the cause, the effect, and what the sort of punishment will be. So before we get into it, please do smash like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Let's have a look once again at this incident, shall we? And then we're going to break it down basically and see sort of exactly what I sort of talking about, and I'm very interested to see what the general feeling is, what everybody else out there has to say about the situation, because I believe Henco Venter could be in for a very, very long ban. What I want to know is that will Dan Cole also receive a ban for sort of the part he played in, because it's something that we continue to talk about, the fact that when you react to things, you generally get punished as opposed to the people that kind of cause the incidents. So a disciplinary hearing might take place today before Glasgow take on Leicester in the semi-finals, and Henco Venter would be a very, very big loss if he is found to have been guilty of eye-gouging, which is what we saw in that clip. We're going to have a little bit of a second look at it as well. Now, if he is banned, we are looking at a potential ban of 12 to 24 weeks or matches, which could take him out for a very, very long time. If it is reckless contact, inverted commas, it could be 6 to 18 weeks. So unfortunately, we could very much see the end of Henco Venter's season at the moment. So let's have a look, shall we, and see exactly where the issues are coming and what we're sort of talking a little bit about. Okay, so over here, we're seeing the tackle that comes over there. So Henco Venter is part of the mall there that goes down. He's the number 8 jersey over there. And as you can see, he's being held down by Dan Cole. And that's where the issue. Now, Dan Cole goes to react, and that's where his hand comes across, clearly making contact with Dan Cole's eyes. And then Dan Cole goes down, clutching his face. We don't really get to see much more of it. He's still down over here. He kind of eventually gets up, takes a while to get up, but he is still holding his face and doesn't look particularly happy. So let's have a look at it, shall we? So first things first, what is the sequence of events? So here we can see Dan Cole has got him in a headlock. And that is, I think that's where this whole incident starts. So as they go down from the mall, he is being held. I think is being held in a headlock by Dan Cole at the base of the ruck. That is, again, pretty clear. For example, you can't really sort of make any incidents. It's not, unfortunately, the way that he landed or anything like that. He's got him down in a headlock. Then the hand comes across from Henco Venter, and you can see it's definitely a reactionary thing, by the way, and we'll look at the video once again. It's a reaction thing because he's being held down. He goes to try and make Dan Cole release him, and that's where the issue comes in, because his left arm clearly comes around and his hand is in the face of Dan Cole, and obviously around the eye area. So difficult to sit there and say that there is not eye gouging involved here, and that's where I think Henco Venter is in very big trouble, because I do think that you're not going to be able to look at that video and basically say there was no eye gouge whatsoever, especially when Dan Cole immediately then goes and clutches his eyes from the reaction. Now, I'm not saying that he was doing it to try and create a penalty or create a card. It's a reaction. There's clearly contact, and he's gone on to react to it. So I think this spells danger for Henco Venter, because even regardless of this, to be in that situation, it should never get to that. Really, you should, and as soon as you start putting your hands in the face of opponents, you risk a big chance of getting punished. We saw this with Marcus Pimpy as well, for example. The main thing is, if you're going to have these sort of scuffles and you're going to grapple and the likes of that, stay away from the face. Simple. Stay away from the face, and this is why I think that we're going to see a very long ban here from Henco Venter. What I'm interested in is this going to be a two-part sort of process? Are we going to be looking at Henco Venter in complete isolation, or are we going to note the part that Dan Cole played? Now, the problem is, what Dan Cole did is not ideal, not great, and probably pretty illegal to have somebody in a headlock. But it's pretty arbitrary in comparison, and I don't think it's enough to sort of take retrospective action. So we're not going to see Dan Cole receive a ban for it, for example. If it was a longer headlock, for example, Henco Venter, was kept there more and didn't cause the release, for example, then there could have an argument on the field for potential penalty, maybe a yellow card, and then we could have potentially looked at further action. But I don't think they're going to look at this incident over here and think that deserves a red card for foul play, for example, and a potential ban for Dan Cole. So at this stage, what we're going to probably see is a punishment for that. Now, the reason I mention this, it'll be interesting to see if there's acknowledgement of the part played by Dan Cole and where that actually comes into any. I don't think it really justifies much mitigation, but it'll be interesting to see if there is mitigation, in inverted commas, of he was provoked and, was put in a situation where he reacted. Whether they even acknowledge that side of things, or whether it's going to be a pure ban straight. You eye-gouge the guy, therefore you're going to be in a big ban, because that's why we're talking about a 12 to 24 weeks. Now, where do you find sort of the line, and what are the other factors? So the factors should be, the inflammatory factors in terms of what caused the incident. Was he provoked? Was there other, acts happening in and around that causes? Could this have been prevented if it weren't for those acts, which there definitely were? Then it's about, you can't really justify foul play, but you kind of almost try to do, I suppose, to a certain degree, and kind of sort of sit there and say, was this an overreaction? Was this an inline reaction? And also, how serious was it? And how deliberate was it? So, for example, Henco Venter, if we're looking at that, he can't see anything. He's down at the bottom of the rack. His face is in the grass. He can't see anything. So he's moving his hands up blindly. And you can't, it's difficult to assume intent or prove intent, because you don't know what's going through his head. You don't know where his arm's trying to go, for example. It looks like he goes directly towards the head. That's kind of the assumption. But obviously, the fact that he can't see anything means that he's only got one arm free, and he's basically flailing it around, trying to get him to be released from this headlock. So that will be an interesting thing. So it's going to be an interesting case, I think, if this does go to a hearing. And I do think he's going to end up with a ban. But what I'm really interested to see, because it's all about precedent, is when it comes to these sort of foul play incidents, when do we start to acknowledge the aggravating factors that other players do? So, for example, like the Maxwell Mapimpi incident, yes, his hand is around the eye area of the opposite man, but before that, he's had a shirt basically ripped off, he's been pushed, he's been shoved, and there have been other aggravating factors. And we very often kind of ignore that. And we basically sort of just put the blame solely on the way people react and the likes of that. And I think it gets poor. I think we do need to start acknowledging that people provoke. And, obviously there's a line that you can't cross, and it's when people cross that line, then they get punished. But I do think there needs to be far more attention being given to the acts that cause these sort of incidents, because at the end of the day, if you snuff out those sort of things, you're not going to have the incidents. And unfortunately, there is a growing rhetoric at the moment where people are basically implying that people are walking onto the field to try and get people sent off, and whether that is overreacting to certain incidents, whether that is trying to bait players into doing something that they know they will, and then getting retrospectively punished for that. But we need to basically cut out all these incidents altogether. And the question is, if you're only going after the perpetrator of the final straw and not looking at the sort of build-up and the other aggravating factors, I don't think you really go a long way to stopping it. Because this is a heat-of-the-moment thing. This is not Henco Venter going out there thinking, I'm going to try and gouge Dan Cole in the eyes. This is him reacting to a situation where he found himself in, which you can't really plan for. And if they acknowledge that and they look to try and take steps to stop any kind of situation, I think that goes far further to try and prevent these sort of incidents than just going after the person who, Henco Venter right at the end. So, personally, I think both should be getting bans. I think Henco Venter should be worse, significantly worse as well. Because it's not a good look at all. But I do think there needs to be an acknowledgement of the role that Dan Cole played in this, and how it could have been stopped. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.